the difference between what we see in the first reading and the gospel about what it means to have faith in God could not be more striking. For we see in this text from Genesis that Abraham's faith leads him to think that God is bringing him to this mountaintop in order to have him prove his faith in God, his love for God, by sacrificing his only son. And Jesus turns that all around because he takes the disciples to the mountaintop to have an encounter with God, where they learn that in fact it is God who proves his love for us by sacrificing his only begotten Son. That is so important to understand as we take this journey into the desert over these 40 days, that our hearts really grasp the great gift of our faith. Our faith is not about believing that we have to in some way prove ourselves to God in order to make God love us, but rather God loves us so much that he wants to prove to us that love by giving his only Son. And the more that we allow that truth, that kind of faith, to grab a hold of our hearts, the less likely we will be to be afraid, to be ignorant, to fall in the traps of sin, of thinking that we have to prove ourselves by giving in to our temptations to greed, to accumulate things, or lust to possess others, or ways in which we have to lie about ourselves in order to protect our small, shrinking ego. No, the more that we allow that truth, that God so loved the world that he gave us his only Son, the more that we do that, the more our hearts will be purified in this season of Lent. It is so important for us to have that kind of faith, not a faith in which we approach God fearfully, afraid that our mistakes in some way are going to distance us from God, but that God starts with his love. Some years ago, in talking to a group of high school students, they asked me about the meaning of purgatory. And so I stopped for a moment and I pointed to a girl in the first row, and I said, you know, there's something very special about you. You're very unique. You're a very lovable person. And she blushed, as I thought she would. And I said to the class, see what happened? As soon as someone told her that she was lovable and good and talented, she blushed, because there is something deep in us that doesn't allow us to really believe that we are of value, that we are lovable, that God in some way cherishes us. And that's what purgatory is about. God telling us how much he loves us, to the point that we begin to believe it, so that when we hear his words of how much he loves us, we don't blush again. And that's when purgatory ends. So today, as we continue this journey of Lent, let us deepen in our hearts that truth. Have that kind of faith, a faith that believes that God gives us his only Son to show us how much he loves us. Or the kind of faith of St. Paul we hear in the second reading. If God is for us, the God who did not spare his own Son, who can be against us?